should be live. So thanks everyone for coming to today's community committee meeting. We have a smaller agenda, but we do have some things that we're going to be talking about, some larger things. But before we get into that, we should go through and see if there are any updates from the initiatives. So any updates from the initiatives? Anyone want to share? Sure, go ahead, Minna.
We had a meeting last week for the website redesign initiative, and we talked about the material we gathered at the Collab Summit, and that's in the process of being distilled into more processed information, and there will be some issues around what kind of content we will need to generate. Hope to have it done by this weekend.
Awesome. Any other updates anyone wants to share?
I guess there was a good user feedback session with the tooling work group. That's ongoing. There's lots of good discussion, and we came up with some concrete steps in terms of, suggesting things that group sees as very useful for a broad number of people on the FS side of things. So I expect that'll be sort of the next outcome we'll see there.
Well,
go ahead, Dan.
Okay,
go ahead, Dan.
One little thing that I wanted to add to that is I'm really happy that Bone Skull, Chris Hiller, is beginning to sort of take that tooling group and go and sort of build out independently, and not just sort of anchor in the the biweekly cadence meetings. So I see that as a growth and expansion of user feedback, which I'm very happy about.
It's awesome. And kind of in that vein, because I was in that meeting, and I just kind of thought there might be some things that people in this group could maybe do to help. Do you have any help get more people involved in that? Is there anything explicitly you, Michael or Dan, would like to call out for ways we can kind of help continue to get engagement there and help promote it more?
I guess if you know any module owners that would have feedback, certainly encourage them to join. I think we had a couple there. We could have used more. A few people commented that they missed the meeting. So just, continue to encourage people to show up and contribute. And then I guess otherwise, just we'll probably at the next meeting promote that again, and through tweets and whatever other ways you can think. So any ways you can help out on that front makes sense too.
And where can people point at their colleagues or friends or module maintainers to?
There is the issues in the user feedback repo. Let me see if I can find the specific one where the discussion's going on. User feedback. Right, so this one is a good, sorry, I'm just letting it load. So I think this one is a good one to engage in, because that's where a lot of discussion of, what are the pain points for the, have already been commented on. And so it's, either good to comment in that, yes, those are big, people agree that those are, key things, or even suggest other ones.
Cool.
So that's issue 59 for anybody who's listening but can't see the chat.
Cool. Okay. Are there any other updates from initiatives? Cool. I do have two things to quickly update on. One is that as a result of one of the meetings at the Collaborator Summit, we actually did begin to kick off an outreach program or an outreach initiative. I don't know if it's technically an initiative yet, but that's something we're trying to kick off. Patricia Dugan, I believe is how you pronounce her last name, and Ben are helping out with that. And additionally, I've offered to help as much as I humanly can. And then on top of that, I believe I just reached out to, I don't believe, I did just reach out to Tracy Lee to help get the ball rolling there with Node Together as well, because she expressed an interest in helping out with that. And one of the more interesting things that I was super excited about from that discussion was that one of the things Patricia is interested in working on with Node Together is putting it in or focusing on community colleges, which speaks to me because I went to a community college and it very much aligned with kind of the experience. The target audience for Node Together is very much the target audience that is present at community colleges. So that's actually a really, really good idea. So that's, an interesting thing that's coming from that. Did someone want to make a comment on that? I heard someone begin to speak. If not, no worries. Cool. Tracy?
Oh, I was just going to give some context for folks who weren't there that the reason that Patricia had recommended, because she's not in the meeting, but hopefully we can get her in future meetings. The idea behind focusing on community colleges, regardless of the country that you're in, if it's possible, it's more about the focus of like hit people where they're at, while we still want this to be an in-person event. The idea is to especially get to folks who are under-resourced. And community colleges are great because they tend to have space, a little bit of resources in the way of, computer labs, so that folks who don't even have access to, a computer necessarily on a regular basis can at least get a taste of this through the Node Together curriculum. And then, we build up that network of folks to be able to go from there. If they don't have a laptop at home, that's the sort of thing we would certainly need to address down the road, but we don't want that to be a barrier to access either.
Yeah, that was a super interesting take on it, reasoning for the approach, because it's spot on. There's also, space at events and things like that, or at the colleges, so it's, a pretty good, everything included.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of, it's from a front end perspective, but a lot of community colleges have been teaching JavaScript for a long time, even before, universities had started incorporating it into their like classic CS curriculum. So we're talking about people who are potentially already a little bit set up for that,
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure. And then the other thing I wanted, anything else anyone wanted to say on that? Ask questions, anything like that? For context, the work there is happening in, I don't know how much we created the repo, but I don't know how much has been done because I haven't checked in recently in the repo. But there's an outreach.
Nothing yet.
Oh, okay, cool.
Nothing yet. We're just starting, so we've got nothing written yet. We're still waiting on Patricia to come back from vacations, so we'll get started on it, I guess, pretty soon.
Cool. Yeah, so there's an outreach repo in the Node.org now, and hopefully work will begin to happen there. Cool. The other thing I wanted to mention was that this is our first meeting since Tracy has been formally elected the ComCom director. So congrats to Tracy. And we're excited to work with her in that capacity. Yeah. So with that, I think we can go to the agenda. Cool. Okay. One last pass. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share from initiatives while I pull up the agenda?
Hello.
Tracy, is this? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dan. It's okay.
I was just going to say, Tracy, is this a good time to clarify the role that you play in the strategic strategic steering committee, strategic
the subcommittee
leadership
subcommittees?
Sorry.
Like as part of being the ComCom director? What do you mean? I'm sorry.
As being the ComCom director, right?
Yeah. So I don't want to tangle them because I don't think that they're bound to one another.
Okay.
So the reason I had been working with the joint strategy subcommittee with the board, which is, sorry, to clarify, it is a board subcommittee. I was asked to lead that because of my prior work at the foundation and having the context. It will be an interesting conversation in the next meeting to figure out, again, address if that needs to change, because one of the things I thought that was really valuable about being able to lead that subcommittee as a community member in the project was having a balance of a board member reporting and also a non-board member helping co-lead. So yeah, that'll be a conversation for us to have. There's something else that I was going to address. Oh, and we still have to, something I have to get on the next agenda for the subcommittee is us needing to codify and be more explicit about how folks access and attend and participate in the subcommittee. So that's a little bit separate from the ComCom director position, but just to reiterate, what the ComCom director position is as a board director, but also as a community representative, I need to do my work to coordinate with Tierney as much as possible to make sure that anything that we need to ask of the board from the community committee, and that is any of the work initiatives that's going on underneath the community committee, not just this, one meeting group, is properly communicated to the board. So I will try to do a better job of communicating when those board meetings are happening so that folks understand what the deadlines are in order for us to be able to get that done on a monthly basis. Something that's really important to keep in mind with board member sort of timelines is that the board needs about a week prior to each of their meetings to surface and understand things, bare minimum, before they actually meet, because any board meeting really should be voting and deciding and not discovery. Just to keep that in mind with folks, I will try to make sure I communicate those timelines, especially when we are trying to, haul butt to get something to the board level. And hopefully that's not too often anyway, because we should always make sure we're understanding what leverage the project has to be doing our work, and not need requests of the board. So we also want to continue to carve out how much agency that we do have and how much the board trusts us to do that work.
Does that answer your question, Dan? Okay.
Yep.
Cool. And with that, I think we can go to the agenda.
Before that, can I speak something about the mentorship initiative?
Sure thing.
So hi everyone. We're starting with a mentorship initiative, like the pairing process, very soon, and we have currently like a good number of people within the Node project itself. If you can visit the link, like there's people from the diagnostics, the modules, the VM, the build, and the tests within Node, which is great. So people can be mentoring people to contribute more to Node itself. But we don't have anyone from the ComCom at the moment, and it would be awesome to have someone from the ComCom like mentoring about the ComCom, the process. We have lots of initiatives. So yeah.
Awesome. Where can people go to do that? Oh, you post the link. Cool.
I hear Tierney has free time.
Yes, I have so much. Yeah.
I saw there was time on your calendar yesterday.
Yeah. Yes. So yes, for ComCom members, the link is in the chat, and if you're a ComCom member who's watching this in the future, it's the Node.js mentorship repo, and then it looks like there's a bunch of things labeled mentor that they're looking for. Awesome. Okay. So with that, we'll actually get to the agenda. So the first thing on the agenda that was requested to be added by William and Manil is the issue 170, Before we jump into discussing that, I do want to note that there's another agenda item that I put below it that is for us to actually discuss this as a subgroup. And so the issue is here, put it in the Zoom chat for ComCom members, but it's around individual membership as a responsibility of the community committee. William or Manil, would you like to take the lead on this discussion?
Sure, I can start. I wasn't present for the discussion around it the last time. So if anyone was there, it would be great if they jumped in at some point. I believe that the meeting that you're copying and pasting over right now was originally the membership restructuring meeting. But now that the activity on that one has mostly been codified into language, it's going to be reused for individual membership. The reason I wanted to discuss individual membership is from what I read about in issue 170. There has been some dissatisfaction as to the effectiveness of it and the way it's been targeted. So I wanted to get started on identifying where individual membership might provide more value. And to that, I was having some conversations about it with Tracy and Ben too at the Collab Summit. And I wanted to propose that we think about individual membership as a way to get the wider Node.js ecosystem. And when I mean ecosystem, I mean people, say, who make packages, things that work with Node and rely on Node. Turn that into a channel for people to participate in the Node.js organization themselves because they have an active stake in it. Just want to open up the discussion at this point.
So that's something, I definitely think that's a good path for it. One of the things that, we're going to have to address very soon with it is how it's actually structured technically in terms of the organizational, like the technology that runs membership. I guess that's the best way I can put it. There's a word I'm thinking of, but I can't think of it. And that is a large chunk of technical debt that, as far as I understand, isn't maintained. So that's going to be one thing. And so I think us having to address that is going to help us be able to kind of entirely reshape how we want to approach this. And, on top of that, Adam had kind of I think it was with Adam and someone else that we were discussing accounts basically on the Node.js website.
Along with Dan Shaw.
Yeah. I thought there was another person involved in that as well. It was when we were at the Mozilla office.
It was Ben.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so having a Node.js accounts and then having that kind of be the portal to it may be a good approach. That's a massive technical undertaking. I'm guessing for us as volunteers to maintain that, but it is one moderately good approach, or one of the more interesting approaches, I guess I should say, not moderately good, because I think that puts a quality.
Yeah, I think just for time's sake too, it's good to note that we have a standing meeting on the Node calendar for addressing individual membership, our membership program, where we can also use that time to talk about what we should be doing moving forward. So the Collab Summit work, right? The meeting that we had was sort of an onboarding to folks in the community committee or people interested in this type of work to figure out how to get started in this subgroup, right? So we're going to be meeting moving forward because this is a very, this is a big undertaking that has multiple components that we need to attack. And we, while we have the agency, right, to audit and decide what we think provides value to our community, what our community actually is, the scope of this, One of the board members, Sarah Novotny, has asked and volunteered to also attend, on top of clearly William Kapke's role as individual membership director, having a very unique and lots of experience in considering this type of work. We have to figure out, like, you know, what value we're providing moving forward, and even if like what we have is worth keeping. But we should, so when would, I think that the next best thing here is like, when is the next meeting to get to really like dive into this?
Yeah, so Tracy, I guess I probably should have opened up on this because I did request this to be on the meeting. All right, so there was a meeting that I understand happened, and I think this was at Collaborator Summit. It was scheduled very fast, but there was I think there was some output from that because now there is a calendar item, like you're saying. So I wanted to bring this to this meeting just so that whoever was there could convey like what was decided as next steps, and clearly a meeting is set up. But I haven't been able to find anything about who's on this committee, who's in attendance in the meeting that was had before. Yep. What's the plan for inviting board members and things like that? So clearly there's context, and I'm hoping somebody can just like fill in the rest of the compound.
I'm happy to help you. I'm happy to help fill in on that.
Just a quick word. I wanted to precise a bit the small comment I made to make a short resume of the Collab Summit meeting. I may have expressed myself poorly, but we did not, as far as I remember, decided to take any action apart from meeting and forming the subcommittee, which was asked by the board, I think. So there is nothing that anybody might have missed, since we haven't done work as of yet.
So, basing off that, we did meet at the Collab Summit. There was myself, Tracy, I don't know if Michael was in the room, Miles Borens, Dan Shaw, Ben, and then I think Patricia was also there. And so we just kind of tried to discuss some of the, the approaches and got some historical context on individual membership from Dan, who was, had helped create individual membership when the foundation was created. And then, we discussed some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses and some of the possible approaches. It was mostly theory crafting and just getting an understanding. That's it. There wasn't an explicit agenda, and there wasn't besides, let's begin to understand this, and then begin to plan for what we can actually do with it, or begin to figure out how we can plan. And then on top of that, to your questions about membership and participation, I very much imagine that we're going to approach this in a similar way to how we approached the ComCom membership restructuring, which is if you want to come participate, cool, you can come participate. It's not a requirement for ComCom members, but if there are ComCom members that are interested in participating, that's the approach that my understanding was that we'll take. And I might have been pulling that context from just the restructuring effort. And so that said, we're not trying to exclude anyone or focus this on a certain subset of people. It's more, if you're interested in helping out, great, please come help. I don't think we have explicit wording around what board membership coming. Sarah Novotny in the last board subcommittee meeting said explicitly raised her hand, said she would be willing to come help and participate. And so that's kind of where that lays. I don't think board members would be unwelcome. It'd probably be much better to get their input and have them there.
Yeah, well, some of the context is that the subcommittee, there was a request, partly by myself, that for this to be successful, we need to know what the board wants out of the individual director's program, period. So without that context, like, we cannot be successful putting together something that will make the board happy, right?
Yes. And William, to respond to that, the last subcommittee meeting established an action item for Sarah to help gather those expectations prior to the subgroup meeting.
Right. So that's kind of why I was surprised that there was a meeting that happened first, but I didn't know what the meeting was about because we weren't quite ready for it. So,
which is why it was an official meeting, but we should have been more explicit about that. That was like a context and history because we need more than just some board members to know, right, the history of this work. And I think you and Ashley, there's so much tribal knowledge there. And it will be, you know, of course, essential for that subgroup to be successful for you to be there as well as some of the board members.
Yeah. So Tierney, there's in issue 170, you had started a list back in November, quite a long time ago, of people interested in participating. Can we maybe reboot the list of who's interested and like call for participants?
Yes, that's fine. That's kind of what the next agenda item was intended to do. Although I guess the title is a little misleading in that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that was very much my intent with that, is to you know, invite everyone who is interested and willing. But yeah. So we've spent a lot of time on this. I'm concerned that we're doing a lot of work here that should be done in that meeting, and that you know, we should kind of try to move on to the other agenda items and let that work be done by that group, if that's okay.
And that's the meeting that's on June 25th?
Yes. Let me make sure that, yes, 25th.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
Cool. Okay, so you know that I'm gonna kind of skip the next agenda item just because we just kind of talked about it. So that's the individual membership subgroup meeting. So we're gonna skip that. We just talked about that and kind of decided on it. So next item on the agenda is possibility of creating new repo for the wishlist document initiative. So AJ, I believe you created this, and I know we were literally talking about it right before the meeting, but I wanted to make sure we got to this. So do you want to give us context on this?
Sure. It started out as what I was calling a priority document. Now it's more so being called a wish list document. We've made a little bit of progress meeting with different working groups and stuff, trying to get some tasks put together. I don't know if I should go into like the full context of what it is. I discussed at a previous ComCom meeting. How do you think?
So I guess specifically what the goal of the issue is.
Okay, so, sure. Yeah, I just, now that we've made some progress, one of the things we've been discussing is how it should function, like what mechanism we should use to have that document in place. And one thing I wanted to try was repo, like have a separate Node.js repo for the wish list where I could, it would just be a centralized location for me to follow, because right now I'm the only person that would be monitoring it. So that way I could just follow that one repo or subscribe to it rather. And anyone who needed something put on the document or edited or removed from the document, et cetera, could just raise an issue and I could be notified and take care of it.
Cool. I don't have any opposition to that. Does anyone have a concern over creating a repo for this? I think we generally try to be pretty lenient with creating new repos and letting that happen.
Nope, just asking for point of process. Do we have an instruction for what folks should do when we approve this in the meetings, that like around like code of conduct or whatever, just basic things we need in the repo?
Yeah, I don't, that might be in the admin repo. I'm actually not sure.
Okay. If not, I would just recommend we can do, until we, you know, PR this as a thing, just a verbal recommendation is to make sure that you have, you know, bare minimum code of conduct linked and a README that tells folks, you know, who's doing the work. And then you can always build off of that with, you know, contributing and making people feel like,
yeah, I
hop in on stuff.
I would just pretty much copy one of the ones from one of the other repos.
Yep. Yeah. It's just that some of them can be really heavy handed. Like you don't necessarily need collaborator MD, contributing MD, like all these things to start.
You know, the basic ones I think are, you know, the code of conduct, which you can almost directly copy from. And Dan might have insight into this because I know he did a lot of work around this with the user feedback and tried to figure it out. So you don't need governance. Yeah, code of conduct, maybe contributing, probably contributing, and then I don't know of any other.
I'd add in license too.
Like, well,
yeah.
I would just throw in the MIT license for now.
So yeah, I reached update on that. I reached out to Mark last night, and I haven't heard back. But yeah, we're explicitly waiting to hear back on that. So the advice we have gotten is once you add a license, you shouldn't ever change it. Will, do you have an update on that?
I was trying to remember. Sorry, because I did go off to my honeymoon for a while. I didn't remember where that landed. Okay, so yeah, the leave committee did meet on that. Did come to a conclusion, and basically the MIT license does cover it.
Okay.
And that is the suggestion, is just to stay with that. That's my high level, but I do encourage you to follow up and get the official statement of of what was happening there. But we're good.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
Be nice
super
to land that formal recommendation in admin. So if I could follow up to the previous point on sort of minimum viable structure, I think the best model it could actually be the mentorship program. That is where we put the least effort into sort of aligning and making sure that all the things were put in place. User feedback, I tried really hard to get everything ducks in a row there, and there's a lot more team there. But check out both of those, and AJ, if you would like any help or feedback, I'm happy to help.
Thank you.
If I could add one thing, since we have one individual working on an initiative, I would recommend looking for some peers and partners to begin supporting that initiative. And if it comes to a situation where your availability changes, please let folks know, since at present you may be the only dedicated eyes on there.
Sure.
Invite folks in.
And I just want to discuss that there was a comment from Adam about adding the project-wide board instead of creating a repo. So I'm not sure how that can be helpful, but I think AJ can comment better on what would be more useful and helpful for others.
Yeah, I have some experience with project-wide boards, which I can kind of talk to. You get kind of where you can pull in tickets to the board from any repo in the project. So we don't get duplicate tickets floating around, which people then have to manage. However, the major benefit here that I think AJ was going for is you get notifications for new stuff, and you get a dedicated workspace for alerts. And I actually just confirmed on one of my private repos that you can't subscribe specifically to a board. It's great as like a posting a board for everybody to see for, hey, here's tickets that need help. Not so much for something you can subscribe to and follow as a dedicated resource. Yes. So depending on the goals here, it may or may not be a viable option.
Yeah, since this was going to cover potentially every part of the Node ecosystem, I didn't want to try to reach out to every repo individually and keep up with all that, especially by myself. So that was why I was leaning towards a repo.
Yeah, so the boards, everybody in the project can add tickets to it. If you're able to make issues and manage issues, you can move it into the project-wide board, just I think by default. So individual owners of repos could take the initiative to move it into the project, Kanban board basically, if they wanted to. So it wouldn't be one person managing.
Right. So I think we're good with creating a repo, right?
Yep.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's good for newcomers to have one place to look rather than to try and look across them all, for sure.
how do we want to go about that? I can create the repo, and I guess I can create a team and add AJ to it. Any objection to that? Cool. I will take that action item. Okay. Next agenda item. Let's see. Record and serve the meetings in audio format. This is a super old issue. This is 5 months old or 6 months old. Has this been on our agenda? Oh, I added this. I don't know if there's anything actionable on this. I know Anne-Marie has actually recently gone through and Anne-Marie and Tracy have gone through and added every ComCon meeting to a YouTube playlist on the Node.js org. Is this something we want to prioritize the effort for?
I mean, it's on YouTube. Like, I don't see the real big benefit, except for saving some bandwidth. I don't know.
Okay.
The YouTube videos are pretty low bandwidth already because there's no video in it, so wouldn't save too much on that front. But you know, the opening issue was just that having it offline and be able to play it in the background, stuff like that. Which I guess having a YouTube Red account, I'm I don't really know what it's like to not have it, so I'm hearing there's some deficiencies.
So I guess my concern with that is looking at the actual metrics for how much the videos are watched. It's not a lot. And so going down the path of doing that extra work for not a lot of engagement, I don't know. I'm a little cautious of that, I guess.
Yeah, there's always the argument of maybe it's the delivery method that's causing the low views. Who knows?
Yep.
I think the main use case was from the original poster was the offline viewing. I'm now trying to figure out if it's available through YouTube Music, which is supposed to be the low bandwidth offlineable version.
You also have to have YouTube Red to have that.
Yeah.
So they would have the offline ability anyway.
Yeah, I have read that Google is looking into opening both background playback and YouTube Music for regular users. That would just solve this whole issue. Also, for the original poster, since the content is released as public access as under a CC license, I think he can use alternative YouTube offlining solutions available on the internet.
Very good way to put that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. That said, it is actually licensed on YouTube as standard YouTube license, which isn't really, I don't think, what we want. That might be something that we could ask Anne-Marie and Tracy to help out with, is going through and actually figuring out how we can kind of make that change that solution over time, and make that go back and retroactively undo all that. Because I think we've just not been explicit about it, and I don't think Zoom is explicit about it when it happens.
Mm-hmm. So I think if we can solve it with non-technical solutions, that would be best.
Yeah, I generally agree, and I'd be happy to try to help figure out what that would be. Yeah, sorry, not Tracy Hines, Tracy Lee. Apologies. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, me and Tracy can talk about it.
With Anne-Marie. Okay. Anything else we want to? Cool. I'm gonna move to the next agenda item then. I took CC agenda off that. Okay, the next agenda item is proposed team discussion policy. I know I was looking at this earlier very briefly, and I know Benjamin added this. I don't have context on this. I haven't been able to read it. Michael, Ben, do either of you have context on it? Because I know you're commenting on it. I see that you were commenting on it, rather. Not to put you on the spotlight.
Sorry, which issue is that again? Can you just paste it in the chat?
Yeah, just did. Admin 121 PR from Benjamin.
Sorry, Firefox is updating as I open it.
No worries.
Right, I guess this one was, I can give some context because I did the same thing in the TSC meeting. Basically, the PR was to add in something similar that we have in the moderation policy about the expectation of privacy. So in the moderation policy and the moderation repo, it basically, there's text that says, hey, everything here is private. If you repeatedly share this in the public, there'll be consequences, maybe even being kicked out, right? And basically this PR was just to add the exact same text into the collaborator repo, or collaboration repo, I forget which was called, which was open so that there could be some internal discussions. On the TSC side, there was nobody who strongly supported it or strongly objected to it. The discussion really went in a different direction, more talking about, well, we should be doing less things there, the least number of things there as possible anyway, because it's private. Most things should be out in the public. So that was, he tagged it with TSC and ComCom with the hope that maybe somebody in one of the two groups would feel strongly enough to either try and push it forward and champion it or propose something different.
So I propose something different to explicitly state that conversations there should not be considered private, and that the current limitation is an implementation limitation by GitHub. And I want to punt this to Adam. Why are the team conversations not available to the public, to non-org members?
Well, I think that repo was potentially, okay, so you're thinking it's just private because we've set up the org that way? Or?
The feature is for team conversation is either organization-wise or team-wise visibility. If we had a third tier of complete public, then this issue would be completely eliminated.
Well, I guess maybe it's that it's set up as a repo so that only people in the org can comment, right?
But are you talking policy across the repos? Are you talking about the team discussions across
team discussion? Yeah. So what happened is people were starting discussions that had assumptions of privacy in the team discussion view. We wanted, and then Benjamin suggested some explicit guidelines to that. Either we decide that those conversations should be considered private and then reflected with the same rules as the moderation repo. And then there were some, people saying, why have private conversation where there are not strictly needed?
Right. Yeah, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, the team discussions in the specific repos not necessarily contain just to collaborators. The collaborators repo that is very much our policy, that anything in the collaborators repo, regardless of whether it's team discussion or elsewhere, has to be scoped to the collaborators repo, because that is explicitly a private repo for a reason. Other repos of the project, yes, I would say as a policy, we do try to be as transparent as possible. We can't tell, TSC repos what to do. We can recommend, just like we try to do, right? We've messed up sometimes too with this, but that everything should be in the public sphere as much as possible. And as part of that, with this new permissions level, I think it can be easy to set it to like, yeah, team discussion. Because I think in some of these circumstances, collaborators were really excited in certain repos to be able to have these team discussions because they like using GitHub as a medium, and they could have a conversation only with the folks who have the context, right? Versus the general participation we have in the repos, which is, we want outside opinions. I think we should always steer towards wanting the outside opinions. But yeah, I mean, it's tough because per repo, right, it's up to the teams there to decide that communication level. We should just recommend that they have, they try to have all of these discussions out in the open.
And even that brings up an interesting governance question. By Michael. That brings up an interesting discussion or governance question for me, which is, okay, so if there's an initiative that isn't like an independently chartered group, is that permissions level decided by like the ComCom or the TSC, or do they still get to choose their own permissions level there? And then if there is a working group, do they choose their own permissions level?
I mean, every working group has to be under either TSC or ComCom. And if there is an independent repo that doesn't fall under either, if someone from the TSC or ComCom sees, that there are problems, I think that like it is currently, from the way the policies are written currently, the TSC's purview to come in and say, because no one has like sanctioned you as in a project under one of these, like you fall under our rules, right? Everything in the GitHub org falls under someone's.
Yeah.
Whether it's explicit or not.
Okay.
So in that case, I would move to, I can revise my suggestion to the team discussion policy and say that the ComCom in general highly recommends to assume that team discussions are public and each repository or chartered subgroup can enact their own rules regarding team discussions, and then I can fight this fight with the collaborators.
I think a repository is different. A repository can be anything, and it can be like directly under the ComCom. I think it does need to be chartered.
Chartered, yeah.
I think it should just be chartered and not repository, because there are initiatives that are technically still follow the ComCom governance, and so theoretically, our decision would be their decisions in that scope, I think.
And then also delegate enforcement to them, which is another thing we wanted to stay out of with the moderation team. So in general, I recommend that team discussions would be considered, even though they are not strictly public. They should be considered public unless stated else by a different chartered sub body, and they should enforce it on their own.
Yeah, where would you put this?
So I would put this in the, not in the moderation policy. I would put it, somewhere like the ComCom rules, or find a way for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because we don't want to try and push a recommendation in like the admin repo where it doesn't really have a place, and then TSC looks like we're trying to push on them.
I think the TSC will support that, just as a general recommendation. I think that will get consensus. Nobody really is pushing for private conversations, more pushing for an explicit, policy or recommendation, or, some decision, because this is a new feature and it is a gray area feature.
And I think that makes sense. It just have to be, I believe, a charter update for both ComCom and TSC. Am I right in that?
If there is something simpler than charter, then yeah.
I don't think that would be a charter update. I think that's just like a guideline of behavior, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're not requiring it. We're saying like, in the spirit of open source and Node.
Okay.
Yeah, as a rule of thumb, anything in the charter is something that the board is concerned about.
Yeah, and we really should charter is we should keep that as skinny as possible.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I'll take that up.
Sounds good. Okay, so final agenda item. We have 6 minutes. Adam, extended color palette.
We'll do it in one. So because I think this was probably left over from last time, tag didn't get removed unless
I intentionally left it on.
Unless you've heard back from board folks about approval stuff. So yeah, although fun, happy announcement, worked with Tracy Lee and Anne Marie to use that color palette proposal to get a kick-ass pride badge in the works. That'll be released soon. So yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, cool. Big thank you on that one. It turned out really cool. Yeah, that's another thing. That's a side note I wanted to add. Me and Tracy are working on adding a bunch of new products in the Node store, and just to have swag in case you guys wanted to have something at conferences. So if you have any other designs or any interesting ideas, let me know.
Awesome. Sounds good. Okay, so Adam, on that issue, you're just explicitly waiting for board approval or board.
Literally just waiting to hear back. So okay. You can remove the label if you don't want the constant check-in every meeting.
Tracy, do you think you could connect with Adam and try to help figure out what needs to be brought at that level?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Awesome. And with that, I think we've come to the conclusion of the agenda.
Also, we had a request for a private session. I don't know if we have enough time.
Yeah, we can head into that now real quick. So members, please stay around. We're going to end the live stream. Thanks everyone for watching. We will see you next time.